The mysterious, the macabre, the out of this world. The following are real people. They have real stories, and they've had real encounters. Here tonight on Newsworthy, 2 words and 2 question marks.
He's alive! Have you checked the children? Get out!
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Encounters. For tonight, we talk to not one, but 2 people that have had encounters with the big guy himself. That's right, Bigfoot. We first start with Mike, who had a cabin in the woods and a whole night worth of stories. Secondly, we'll follow it up with Steve, who also has more than one great encounters with Bigfoot. We're here with Mike, and Mike has had an awesome encounter at a cabin he wants to share with us today. Tell us about it, Mike.
Well, about 5 years ago, this is probably about 2019, my wife and I, we like to go hiking in Hocking Hills. So she rented a cabin, and this one was very remote. They even told us to get there, you better bring a 4-wheel drive because it was about 3 miles off the road. So the first night we're there, about 1 o'clock in the morning, my wife's like, hey, somebody's out there lighting tiki torches. I go, what are you talking about? And I look out the window and I see this fire. Well, what had happened, a tree had come over and hit the power lines and shorted out and blocked us in, and all of our power went out. We had no phone service or anything, and the branches had caught on fire. So didn't really think a whole lot of it. And then the next night, about the exact same time, 1 o'clock in the morning, she goes, oh my God, what is that? And this sound was so loud. Let me play you what we heard. And this was from inside the cabin with just the window open. So it was pretty disturbing. So we're in this cabin, and it had a little loft, and I told her, I said, maybe we should go up in that loft, to get away from the ground floor, because I don't want anything coming in, looking in those windows or whatever.
Wow.
And, I was armed, so I figured at least if I'm up there, I got a chance.
Right.
But then we didn't have anything after that.
Man, that's freaking awesome. So
Yeah.
that happened here in Hocking
That
Hills?
happened here in Hocking Hills, yeah, in a very remote area. I'm from northern Ohio, and this was more remote than I even realized we had in this state.
Wow.
So after that sound, that made me a little more curious about that tree the night before.
Right.
So I went over and looked at beside the cabin. So kind of to digress on that tree, the power company traced the line back and found out where the power had gone out and cut the tree away. So that was the only way we were able to get out of there. So when I was looking at it, I'm thinking, why on a dry, windless night did the only live tree, there's 3 or 4 small dead trees that were still standing, but a tree about 8 inches in diameter had fallen over. Well, when I looked, I saw an imprint. Now, I can't say it was a footprint because I didn't see toes or anything like that, but there was about a large 15-inch imprint right beside that tree that made it appear like something had pushed this over.
Man, that's crazy.
So evidently this thing didn't want us there.
No, apparently not. Well, man, Mike, I appreciate your story, and thank you for sharing.
All right, you're welcome.
Wow. Mike's story is super scary. But if you hang on, you ain't seen nothing yet. Here's Steve. Hey, guys. Welcome to the show today. We're with Steve, which is a great name, by the way. Steve is from Southern Ohio. He's got a couple of awesome stories he wants to share with us today. Steve, how are you?
Good. And yourself?
I'm doing great, man. So tell us the story you were telling me that your mom used to tell you all the time.
Yeah. Picture 1948, Casey County, Kentucky.
Okay.
Down in the hill, Liberty. My mom was from Middlesbrough. She's a young child, late 40s, country church. no indoor plumbing, and she had to go. So she got permission, walked out the back of the church, walked over to where the outhouses were, and she saw a rustling in the field behind the outhouses. And so as she got closer, she said something stood up on its feet, bipedal, and just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, to an 8 or 9-year-old.
Right.
Dark, hairy. She didn't mention anything about the eyes. It kind of looked at her and grunted and then went back into the field.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of, grunting. And she told her parents about it. They laughed at her. A few weeks later, somebody else saw something in that general area. And some of the farmers actually loaded up their guns and stuff and did a walk through the woods.
That's smart.
Yeah, they were calling it the hairy man or the field man or the wild man. Okay, so that's for part one.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome.
Okay.
I don't live far from them.
Oh, really? What part?
I live in Lawrenceburg, which is right about 40 minutes from Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm born now. I was born in 1961. I'm still an infant. My parents had moved to Cincinnati, but they had come down to visit my mom's parents. Now, my grandfather was a teetotaler, song leader in the church. I mean, he had a route. He would go to one church on a Wednesday, one church on a Thursday, one church on a Sunday morning, another church on a Sunday night. He'd lead the singing.
Right.
Okay, so they had gone to church. My mom and dad and me were at the farmhouse, and they said that they heard at the edge of the woods of the farm, behind the barn, the most blood-curdling, bone-chilling scream they had ever heard. They said it was partial scream, partial growl, and it just went on and on and on.
Wow.
And my dad is a no-nonsense kind of guy, and it shook him up, and he actually went out to the front of the farmhouse and fired some shotgun shots into the air. My grandparents come home from church. They tell the story, and they laughed at him, and they finished their visit, came back to Cincinnati. First thing, a few weeks later, they head back down to visit the family, and they pulled into the driveway. My grandfather came out, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "I'll never call you a liar again."
Wow.
He heard it.
Wow.
In the same general area. Nobody could really describe, but the best thing I ever got out of the stories was a blood-curdling, growling, scream, and it was loud, it was long, and it echoed.
We have had several interviews this weekend, and at least two of them have had audio recordings of what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
It's guttural.
Yeah, that's the right word.
And
Yeah.
it's loud and it's long, and it's, unless you're Michael Phelps,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have the lung capacity to make
Yeah.
those noises.
Yeah.
So I'm 100% I'm in, I believe you.
I live on the eastern side of Cincinnati, and I was YouTubing, and I never thought this was possible, but I live near East Fork Lake, Claremont County, Ohio. They have video footage of one
Oh, wow.
in a public park near a metropolitan area.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so my brother-in-law is a professor of biology at Lynchburg University.
Oh, wow.
And he's worked for the Smithsonian, the Cincinnati Zoo. Now he's a tenured professor. We got on the subject of Bigfoot. And we found the best answer that we could give was not impossible, maybe improbable.
Right.
Because we're willing to say a certain percentage is misidentification.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, that would be accurate. I
Mhm.
100% agree.
Just like with UFOs, to me, 99% of what we see is the government stuff.
Right.
But I'm willing to leave the door open.
Well, Jerry and I often will say, you can discount and disclaim and defame 95 to 96% of stuff, still leave 4%.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I've often told people here today that, and this is my honest belief, the world is very big and we are very small.
I agree with that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing my brother-in-law said, he said, the reason, from his position, that it's improbable, he says, I have to leave the door open because they're finding new species of animal every day.
Right.
I mean, whether it's microbial, insect, they found a species of ape somewhere in Africa that had never been seen before.
Wow.
So
If it can happen there, it can certainly happen here.
yeah, yeah, and I'm a proponent of the offshoot of how do you say that, Anthropithecus?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that it could be something like that.
Right. Or leftover Neanderthals.
Yeah.
Up until very recently, most people believed Neanderthals were very non-smart.
Mm-hmm.
But we have now new evidence that says, hey, they hunted in packs. They were
Buried their dead.
extremely strong. They buried their dead. They would make 2 or 3 of an average human today. And if you're a hunter in the woods and you see that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing I discount real quick is when the people get on the subject that they're interdimensional beings.
yeah,
That the aliens are dropping them off. No.
I'm with you there. I'm a flesh and blood.
Yeah.
If it does exist, it is flesh and blood.
Yeah.
And having had an experience myself, I know what I saw.
Yeah, exactly. What really got me to believe more in something like the cryptids is I can't remember the scientist's name, but he's the anthropologist. He's on TV a lot. And in a nutshell, in 2 segments, if people are faking the footprints, who would be smart enough to put dermal ridges in the footprints?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then the Gimmel Patterson film, who would take enough time to build a suit that's female?
Right. And that shows correct muscle tone and
Exactly.
and if it's a dude in a suit, that's pretty even today by today's standards with tricks and we can figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah. So my final words to your viewers: have an open mind.
Amen. I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Jerry, if you can't see the light,
Be the light.